Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. Happy Juneteenth as well. We are going to talk about our potential cyclone in the Gulf of Mexico that has grown in size and is impacting Texas and Mexico here over the next couple of days with some gusty winds, surge, and heavy rain. I'm also going to take a look at the rest of the tropics, and then we'll talk about the threat for some heat and severe weather building from the Midwest into the Northeast. So thank you for joining me today. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. We need rain here. If you can send it my way, please do. But here is a look at our massive Gulf storm. Massive in size, a large area of tropical storm force winds, especially on the northern side of it. It is gradually organizing into what may be a tropical storm here by tonight. Alberto is the first name on the list. Whether or not it officially gets that classification, still yet to be determined, but we're looking at probably an 80% chance of that happening. And all the rain with it is going to be spreading north and west into Mexico and Texas through the day tomorrow before it moves onshore. We may behind it see yet another system form in kind of a similar fashion. This one may not be quite as well organized, so it's got a little bit less of a chance of developing, but unfortunately, for the people that are getting the rain and the wind today, we are probably going to see more of that here later this weekend into next week. So kind of a 1-2 punch. And then we're also tracking a new disturbance that has finally formed here heading towards Florida by the end of the day on Friday. And I'll talk about the potential for that in just a second. This is from the National Hurricane Center. And here is our outlook map. Right now, potential Cyclone 1. And then surrounding that, in the next couple of days, a new system which may develop into a depression or storm. I say may because it's a little early to make that call. And the time frame for that's going to be over the weekend and the first part of next week before that moves onshore. And then finally, we've got a disturbance that has finally formed out of the remnant part of a cold front. That's got a 20% chance of becoming something here on Friday before it moves inland over northern Florida or Georgia and South Carolina. So 3 areas on the map I continue to watch. It's been that way all week. Here is a larger view of the tropics, and you can see just how big our circulation is over the Gulf. This is what's called a gyre. It's a circulation that has drifted north from Central America, and a lot of disorganization in the clouds, but a lot of moisture in place and a lot of heavy rain and gusty winds with it. Now you'll see there's another piece of energy on the tail end of it that's going to kind of move in and follow right up behind it here over the weekend into next week. So that may be where our next system forms. And then you can see we've got an upper level trough here where we do have an area of thunderstorms that has finally developed. And that may be our next invest. We're going to see if there's a plane heading into that later on this afternoon or evening. They probably have it on the docket, but they may still cancel it depending on what happens here in the next 12 hours. Here's a closer look at the Caribbean and the Gulf. And again, what you can see is really just 2 features on the map for the time being. Potential Cyclone 1 in here. The center is in here and right now still kind of disorganized. And that's what's keeping it from being upgraded to a tropical storm. But the effects are basically the same, especially north of it. Gusty winds, heavy amounts of rain, and increased storm surge. We have a tail of moisture over the Yucatan Peninsula over in here. And we may see another low pressure system generate from this as it moves into the same general area here over the second half of the weekend. And then finally, here is our circulation, which is beginning to form now, just a tiny little low pressure system. It is not looking like it's going to grow too much, but that may increase our moisture over the Bahamas here tomorrow and eventually Florida, Georgia, and maybe South Carolina by the time we get to Friday. Sometimes these little sneaky ones are interesting to watch. They may not be nearly as big, but they may get together faster than the bigger ones. If you think about, I don't know if I want to use like an analogy of an athlete, but sometimes you see those bigger ones bring a bigger punch. Like if you're playing football and you've got a major, like a defensive end that weighs 300 plus pounds, they're going to leave a lot of damage. But the fast ones are the small ones that can get in there and catch the ball. So there's my sports analogy. Please don't quote me on that. It's pretty bad, to be honest with you guys. But another look at things here, and you can see just how much of the Gulf is covered in cloud cover. Probably about 60% of it. The Caribbean about 50% full. But fortunately, the Greater Antilles are relatively dry for the time being. That may change, though, here in the coming weeks. Another look here at the east coast of the United States, and you'll see there's a lot of cloud cover spreading eastward, and this is what's going to keep those temperatures from getting too out of reach here today and tomorrow over the eastern U.S. It'll still be hot and humid, though. Heat wave for sure, but nothing extreme like you may have been watching on the news. I feel like people take an idea and just run with it and don't look at the science behind it sometimes, and that can be kind of dangerous. So we've talked about how hot it's going to be, but honestly, this is not like a historic heat wave coming for the east, thank goodness. But here's our area that is spinning up here east of the Bahamas. You can see it's around 70 west here. This is the 70-degree west line. Florida is 80-degree west, so our circulation is right down in here, and we're going to see if a plane gets in there later on to see if a little bit of a low pressure has formed. It's small, though. That's the good news. The thunderstorm activity with it, you can see this down in here, may affect the Turks and Caicos today and eventually the central and northern Bahamas, but not a big system, not a big rainmaker to break our drought here in northern Florida. The rest of the Atlantic looking pretty quiet. This is the central Atlantic. We don't really see anything of concern. Here's the eastern Atlantic. Waves will come off of Africa, but they're not likely to develop anytime soon. And then here's a look at the Gulf of Mexico. And this is our potential cyclone. And you'll see kind of the general center is in here, getting ready to pass south of Houston, which is up here, and generally speaking, moving westward. Now, right now, the strongest winds are well to the north of the center, so Texas is getting it regardless of what the circulation center is going to do. But as this system gets closer to the coast, we have a situation called coastal convergence, which may allow it to tighten up and finally organize on its final approach coming onshore. That convergence is caused by the shape of the coastline. It's also caused by the difference in temperature between the Gulf and land. During the day, the land is hotter than the Gulf. At night, it's cooler. What we see is a switch over in circulation, if you're familiar with how a sea breeze works. And that convergence and that circulation change may actually cause us to concentrate at the very last minute. So it's very possible we have a tropical storm for a couple of hours as it's making landfall, and then that's it. I got to move along here. I want to make this video shorter for a couple different reasons, but here is a look at, so I was going to update this for you guys. Here's kind of an update at what of the GFS model and what it's showing here. The green indicates cloud cover and moisture aloft. We see a ton of that here, and it's going to push westward, and we'll actually see some drier air replacing this moisture from Houston on east. See this brown in here? Will not be quite as cloudy or quite as humid here in the next couple of days. It'll certainly be hot, though. But here's our next system that comes in right behind it, probably weaker here by Friday night, Saturday morning. But you'll see there's a piece of it that's going to send moisture up into Florida. But instead of the western half of the Gulf being covered, it'll be the southern half of the Gulf, according to the latest GFS here. Same goes for the Western Caribbean, by the way. Here's our other feature here over the northern Bahamas, and you can see it just, GFS doesn't really develop it. It's just got kind of this wave and maybe a very tiny little low, and it's expected to move onshore northeast Florida here at 12Z Friday. That's 8 a.m. Eastern time. And then whatever's left of it's already kind of getting absorbed by our bigger area of high pressure by Saturday morning. So not much to write home about with that. Our next system, though, lots of multiple circulations. Again, it's going to look sloppy here. It's going to be difficult to organize quickly. This one may not even get a name, but it may become a depression. Again, it's not something I have enough skill to try to predict at this point until it forms. But you can see, generally speaking, it is going to move by pretty quickly. Things are going to be a little quieter. And then our next push of moisture makes its way into the southeast towards the following weekend, Friday and Saturday next weekend. But this is subject to change. Here's a look at the NAM, and you can see on satellite just how deep our cloud cover is and how moist it's going to be coming into Texas. This is extreme amount of moisture in place. Fortunately, it will subside tomorrow morning and move away. Here's our next feature heading towards Florida tomorrow afternoon, and most of the shower activity is going to be tomorrow night and first thing on Friday. According to the NAM, it just kind of moves across like a thunderstorm complex, and then that's that. And then by Friday, things are already kind of quieting down across this entire area. It could be pretty darn hot here across the south on Friday afternoon as we remove some of that moisture. So a lot to talk about, but not necessarily a lot of impact with that next feature. Here's a look at our ensembles with the European. This is our potential cyclone, probably close to tropical storm strength, but it's already on shore here by tomorrow afternoon and weakening over Mexico. We get a quick break, and then this is Friday afternoon and evening, and we see models showing our next system developing in the Bay of Campeche, probably Friday night or Saturday morning, and then moving west or northwest, getting close to South Texas on some of these solutions by Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening. and then likely onshore sometime on Monday. But again, look at the spread here. It's just a little bit too big to make that exact call at this point. Finally, our system here east of Florida, this may become Invest 92L. We'll have to see. All solutions form it and move it west-northwest, but all have very high pressures, about 1,015 millibars. So at the very worst, I think we're talking a very low-end tropical storm if it tries to form, more likely a depression and quite possibly nothing other than just a weak low-pressure system. But we no longer have solutions bringing it up into the Carolinas. Generally speaking, the Space Coast and the first coast of Florida are going to be the areas impacted late Thursday night into Friday morning. So we'll talk about our cyclone here. We're going to spend the next couple minutes looking at that. Expected to accelerate to the west here today and tonight around our high pressure. Right now, winds are 40 miles per hour, potentially could get up to 50 or 55 before landfall, which will be before daybreak tomorrow, Thursday. So probably very early in the day on Thursday. And you can see here, the plane flew into it yesterday, and it found there was a weak circulation here, a weak circulation here, and a broader circulation in here. But it also found that winds near these circulations were not extremely strong. And in fact, the strongest winds were 200 to 300 miles to the northeast of these little centers. So kind of a dumbbell here where you've got these two little circulations kind of pivoting around each other. And then the broader pressure gradient, the difference in pressure from our high to the northeast and this lowering pressure is where the strongest winds were felt. So we're seeing winds that are strong well north of this center, and as it comes towards Texas, that's where the stronger winds are going to be. And you can see on the map, whoops, let me get my pens off. But you can see on the map here just the massive size of this system. So the bigger it stays like this, the less likely it's going to concentrate in the center and strengthen. But unfortunately, a lot of these areas in Texas are going to see tropical storm conditions today and tonight with winds of 40 to 50 miles per hour. And that's going to kick up our surge here up to 2 to 4 feet on the upper Texas coast, right on up into Galveston Bay, 1 to 3 feet in southwest Louisiana, and then on the central and lower coasts of Texas as well. So some coastal flooding coming, freshwater flooding as well. The chances somewhat reduced now for the I-10 corridor. We're mainly looking at deep South Texas. If you're in San Antonio, I know that's not what you want to hear, these lower chances for rain. If you're in Houston, you're probably okay with it after what we've had. But the areas that need the rain the most are going to get it, and that is kind of fortunate. But unfortunately, that could also lead to some significant flooding. Wind gusts today into tonight may approach 50 to 60 miles per hour on the Texas coast, 40 to 50 inland. We'll see these winds dying off here around this time tomorrow morning, so much less wind tomorrow as this system moves in and weakens. Looking farther up into the Louisiana coast, gusts may get close to 40 miles per hour, but primarily off the coast here, and then winds should subside tomorrow gradually. Rainfall totals are going to be ramping up to impressive values. The NAM says the lower Rio Grande Valley, which will be about 100 miles north of our circulation center, has the potential to see close to a foot of rain. So Weslaco, McAllen, those areas, maybe even Brownsville, potentially could see significant rain. It could cause flooding. Overall, it's going to help out, though, because it has been a very dry spring and very hot. We've had record heat here in May and early June. But unfortunately, sometimes these drought breakers can bring a lot of punch with them. Farther north, though, we are not seeing significant amounts of rainfall along I-10. Generally speaking, less than an inch of rain from Houston to San Antonio and less up to Austin. And the reason for this is even though we've got a massive system, eventually the high pressure area to the north has allowed it to just trend a little bit farther south with the circulation going into Mexico. And our highest rainfall totals will be across the Sierra Madre, where we may see some crushing amounts of rain here in the next few days. And that is unfortunate for the residents over there in that part of Mexico. Looking at Louisiana and the upper Texas coast, generally speaking, it's already been wet. This is just going to be some bonus rain, but most places are going to get less than 2 inches out of it. So we've seen probably the worst for this week. There'll be more next week, which I will take a look at in future videos. Moisture picks up across Florida today and tonight. Scattered showers and storms coming in from east to west. Here is our disturbance, by the way. You can kind of see it may bring us perhaps an inch or two around Cape Canaveral over to Orlando and up towards Daytona. Again, not a flooding event expected, although somebody may get some pretty heavy rain for a brief amount of time, but this will be kind of like your afternoon thunderstorm, to be honest with you guys. Winds may pick up out of this low pressure system briefly. Whether or not it gets a name, we could see gusts getting close to 30 miles per hour starting tomorrow evening And the worst would be tomorrow night, first thing Friday, and then it's already moved inland and weakened. I don't get too excited about the NAM. Sometimes it blows something up quickly, like it's showing a 65-mile-an-hour gust here right near the Kennedy Space Center. But, you know, there's certainly the potential it could get windy for a little bit of time there. All right, let's look at the rest of the U.S. Severe weather across the north central plains last night. I've updated it now. For whatever reason, I got logged out of Pivotal, so let's fix that for you. Sorry about that. Going to do things on the fly here, but you'll see, really, we have two areas of the country that are pinpointed. The Northeast pinpointed for heat watches and warnings as we deal with our first heat wave of the summer. And then you'll see the plains in Texas under flood watches. But the severe weather threat this morning has fallen apart. There will be the threat for some more, though, as we get into the afternoon. And the reason why is that you've got this big front here from southwest to northeast. That's transporting moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico up and around our big ridge of high pressure. The areas that have been getting a lot of rain, Omaha, Minneapolis, northwestern Wisconsin into central and northern Ontario, are going to stay wet throughout the day today. Flooding threat in here as well in the central plains. But we are going to see everything gradually shifting off to the east around our high pressure system. There's a pretty big trough down in here. That is going to allow a cold front to drop southward into the northeast here as we get to the end of this week and over the weekend. That'll break up the heat and push it more into this direction than up in here. But it is also going to be kind of a ring of fire situation where on top of our ridge, we are going to see some active weather in the coming days. So let's take a quick look at that for you guys. Here is the GFS model from this morning. You can see this big high building into the Great Lakes. That's going to push our front southward here and bring active weather into the northeast right on through the first part of the weekend. Then yet another system here moves across the upper Midwest this weekend and across lower Canada. Some severe weather will be possible, especially as we get to Sunday. Take a look at how active the northeast looks like it could be as this low pressure strengthens. And then we'll see a brief cool down early next week before the heat does reload and rebuild. On the edge of that heat, though, we are looking at active weather, and I do think at some point later next week in the Great Lakes region and maybe into the Northeast and across Ontario and Quebec, we do need to watch out for at least one complex of severe weather, maybe two. And I hate to say derecho at this point, but that setup certainly looks like it could happen. Right now, too early to say where and when, but something that we're going to keep an eye on. We have a marginal risk for severe wind from eastern Indiana, lower Michigan, all the way into New England. That includes Ontario and southeastern Quebec. Most of that will be this afternoon into early tonight. A little bit better chance tomorrow for severe weather across upstate New York, western New England, and northern Pennsylvania, but that threat extends into lower Maine as our front drops south. And then less of a chance on Friday, but you'll see this next area in the Twin Cities region is going to be heading our way over the weekend, and we may see that additional severe weather. Here's a look real quick at the NAM model. Looking at today, showers and storms across upstate New York. Sorry about that. And you'll see northern Pennsylvania in on that risk. More activity here later today over southeast Michigan, southwest Ontario, northwestern Ohio. Take the rain while we can because it's going to be hot and dry for a lot of the summer here. Tomorrow, a better chance for severe weather as you see things activate along our front from Maine back through New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. This will cool things down. The highs aren't going to be quite as high on Friday as earlier projected because the front's dropping farther south than projected. And then we'll see more storms firing up on Friday and maybe a little bit more severe weather and some downbursts out of this. Speaking of temperatures, nationwide, you'll see where the heat is going to build, and it actually get worse across the country next week, especially the mid-Atlantic, but also across the plains here. This entire area will be running hot. This is next Sunday and Monday. And then next week, we continue to be pretty hot across much of the country. And this will be the trend heading into summer here. If you look more closely here at the Northeast, it is hot today. It's hot tomorrow, but we're not seeing the triple digits that showed up a few days ago on our models. Now, farther south, where the drought is building, we do see that threat for triple digits here by Sunday. 100 degrees around Richmond and D.C., and then down into South Carolina. Here's Monday. And Tuesday, and the heat just doesn't really go away. It gets suppressed, but it doesn't go away. In fact, it builds back. And as we get into the weekend here next weekend, the model is showing some triple-digit heat potential in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Alabama. And this will eventually spread northward before the 4th of July. And a lot of the challenges with the heat that are building in is that it's coming in over area that is very dry. We've not had much rain in the last month over the Mid-Atlantic or over the Eastern Corn Belt. And so as a result, we're looking at potentially a flash drought or a rapid onset drought, which is going to affect agriculture across all of this area. And unfortunately, it is going to magnify the strength of this heat wave because hot air loves dry conditions, which is why deserts flourish the way they do. And unfortunately, that's the situation that we're looking at here. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you for watching. As always, I want to give all the glory to God who has given me the ability to have the strength to do this, have the strength to help others, and just to fulfill my calling as a meteorologist. And doing something like that seems like it shouldn't be difficult for somebody who loves the weather, but I will say there are days where it's easy to be discouraged. But I go back and I realize the promises given to me of eternal life and the sacrifices that were made. And my name is Joshua, and I go back and read the book of Joshua sometimes. Joshua 1:9, King James Version says, "Have not I commanded thee, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest." And I want to use that as encouragement to you as well, to realize that no matter what battles you're going through, the Lord is with you. Whether or not you choose to acknowledge him is your choice. And I hope you make that choice wisely, but I won't tell you what to do. But just realizing that you were created for a purpose, you matter, and that the Lord is with you in whatever battles you're facing should be encouraging. No matter what happens in the rest of the world, and trust me, there's a lot, just know that you can count on God to fight your battles for you. You can tell your battles how big your God is. Don't tell your God how big your battles are, but tell your battles how big your God is, and he will change everything. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday. I'll see you again tomorrow morning. Be safe.